Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, We're the Gnomes Live. This is Sharon Oyella, and today we're making a set of table and chairs, and these are made from cardboard and twine. And I made the pedestal out of a vintage thread spool. Okay, so all simple to find materials. If you've been following me for a while, then you know that I'm working on a pumpkin house right now, and that's what this table and chairs were made for. You can make this table and chairs any size you wish to make them. Alright guys, just to give you some options if you're not interested in the chairs that we're doing today, I've made these other ones in the past on video, and they're made with twine and vintage thread spools, and I know that twine would feel like it won't be strong, but take a listen. Once that glue is cured, the twine is super strong, so there's no worries there. And also, just for interest's sake, I made these tiny little pieces here out of twine, this little chair. I made a pair of these and a table and this little bed for a walnut. And I'm just showing these to show you that with using twine and cardboard and simple materials like that, we're not limited with size. We can make things that are easily adjustable, just like the chairs I'm showing you today. You could make them any size you wish to make them. Alright, so let's get on with the chairs that we're here to make today. If you're interested in those things that I just showed you, you can look in the pinned comment below. There you'll find the video links, and you'll also find detailed timestamps. Let's get started. Alright, so like I said, I'm using twine, tacky glue, a pair of scissors, a pair of pliers, and an awl will come in handy, but you can use a pin. I also used another pointy tool, a little bit thicker than the awl, and then this little drill bit is not necessary to the project, but it did come in handy. Some embroidery thread or string, and for the base, again, I'm using a vintage thread spool. If you wanted to use the same, then you'll need something to cut the top off. If you want to, of course, if you want to shrink it down. For the tabletop and the chair seats, I'm using regular cardboard, and for the back of the chairs, I'm using the thin cardboard from a cracker box. You'll need something to sand down any glossy parts, so an emery board or sandpaper. And of course, paint colors are totally up to you, but I'm using black, burnt umber, cinnamon brown, hunter green, and a beige. And for a sealer, and to give it a little bit of shine, I'm using a clear nail polish, but of course you can use any sealer of your choice. Guys, we're about to get started. Before we do, I also made a crystal ball, and if you want some food ideas, look at the end of the video, and we'll be talking more about that then. Alright, my friends, we're about to get started. Remember, there are detailed timestamps and links to this project in the pinned comment below. Alright, so to determine the size of my table, I just went by the size of the room. Okay, that's how I build all my miniatures. It's all by eye, and I just go by the size of the room or my characters. So I literally got a piece of cardboard like this, and I just cut it down, and then I could see that that was pretty much the size, but I wanted to bring it down to like a rounder type table. So I put it in the room, and I just want to make sure that I have room on each side of the table, so when I put a character in there and I take photos, it's not bumping into other stuff. Okay, so you can make this any size that you want. This is just according to the size of my room. So now I'm going to sand down the glossy side. Of course, I am going to be gluing legs to that side. So I want to sand that down, and I'm using an emery board. You can use sandpaper. And of course, because we have cut cardboard, it has the open edge that is not paintable. So we can line that with twine. I've done that many times. You can use twine, you can use newspaper or napkin, whatever you have on hand. I decided to have a more smooth look, so I'm going to go with the thin cardboard off a cracker box. So we just cut that down to a narrow strip, and I'm going to be gluing that around the edge, and mine won't reach all the way around, so I have to have a little section as well. But of course, again, you want to sand down the glossy side. Alright, so my original table, I had a single piece of cardboard, and I glued the edge to it without a problem. When I tried to refilm that for you today, I had a little bit of a struggle getting this strip around. It just wouldn't sit right, and I was really struggling, so I thought, okay, I will add it to another piece of cardboard to make the edge thicker to work with. So it all depends on what you want to work with. You can do 2 pieces of cardboard or just 1, but I think this is easier here, so I'm just going to add a piece of cardboard to this. So I just added tacky glue, spread that around evenly across the entire surface, and I'll stick it right on top of this one that I've already sanded, and then I'll cut that out. So there we go. Now we have a wider edge to work with, and this actually went a lot easier. Okay, so now I'm going to put a bead of tacky glue around this entire edge, or I started with a little bit first, and I'll put my strip on there. And this is why I recommend tacky glue as well, because tacky glue, it's just white glue, but it grabs on a lot faster. So if all you have is school glue or Elmer's glue, that will work. but tacky glue is going to grab on faster and make your job a little bit easier. Anyways, moving on, I'm just going to put a piece of tape here on the end so I can glue in the rest of the strip. So I'm just going to hold that. It's going to be temporary. Now I'm going to add tacky glue to the rest, and I'll get this strip all the way around. All right, so I made it around, and you can see it doesn't quite reach, so I'm going to add a little patch here. And by the time I got around to the other side, the one end was holding fine on its own, so I could remove that masking tape. And again, that's another reason why I recommend tacky glue. It grabs on fast. Alright, so now we're going to strengthen up the edge. Now you can see because I doubled up my cardboard, I don't have much of an edge left there to strengthen up. On my original table I had quite a bit, so I glued in a full piece of twine. So for this one, I'm going to put a bead of tacky glue around the edge, and I'm going to break down the layers of the twine and just add one layer of twine around. What that's going to do is strengthen up the edge of your table. It's going to make that cracker box board unbendable. Okay, so I do recommend adding this step. And then once you have the twine around and the bead of tacky glue, then you want to add another bead of tacky glue on top and then spread that around evenly. And then let that dry. And I'm going to let you listen to my other table, my original table here, and watch how strong it is. Alright, moving on to the pedestal. Now I'm using a vintage thread spool. You don't have to do it that way. You can add whatever legs you want to add. And the height is up to you. You could glue it on the way it is. I wanted mine to shorten up a little bit, so I did cut off the very top of the spool, and for that I used this little saw here. Tacky glue in the center, and then place that pedestal right on the tacky glue. So now I'm going to paint it, and I painted it the same colors that I chose for the little table in my previous video. So I'm going to paint it black first, and then I will cover it with a hunter green, and then dry brush with a beige and a bit of black. And this is the final look here. And if you need to see that, you just look in the previous video. That will be linked in the pinned comment below. Alright, so for the chair, we're going to start at the very top, and we're going to be using thin cardboard, like cracker box or cereal box cardboard. Make sure to sand down any glossy parts. And then you want to cut a strip, and the strip is totally up to you, however big or wide or whatever, however you want it to look. I just went for a very simple design. So I'm just measuring here because of course I want a matching chair. But when I did the first chair, I didn't measure anything. I just kind of went by eye. So I had to cut 2 of these pieces, and I'm just rounding out the tops on either end just to give a little bit more of a design there. So the twine that you choose, I have thicker twine and thinner twine, and the thickness of your spindle is going to depend on how many layers you pull apart from your twine. If you leave the twine on the big roll, of course it's too thick, I think anyway, so you want to break down those layers, but the layers are totally up to you. So when you cut your twine, make sure that it's cut way too long than you need. We're going to cut off the excess after. Okay, I'm going to do a layer of tacky glue across the entire surface, and then I'm going to take one of these pieces. I'm just going to spread out the tops just a little bit, freeing the ends so it has a little bit more to grab onto. So every single one, I'm just going to fray the ends just a bit, and you want to space them however you want to space them, and the number of spindles is totally up to you. I'm going with 4 here. And you want some space in between those too, because you want to glue a piece on top. So you want to make sure you add glue on top of these as well and spread that out evenly. And now you can put your other piece. Now you're sandwiching the twine in between 2 pieces of cardboard. And just make sure that there's full contact between the glue and the cardboard and the twine. So you can pinch the very tops here like I'm doing, just to kind of form it a little bit more. And we can do more of that after a bit too. Now I'm going to let it dry. I'm going to sandwich it between, you can use popsicle sticks. I just want to make sure that there's full contact in there between everything while it's drying. And I'll leave this sit for about 20 minutes. Alright, and for the chair seat itself, this is literally how I measured to get the size that I wanted. I wanted it to fit right underneath the table. So that's how deep it is going to be. And the width is going to be determined by the top of the chair that I just made. Okay, and then I just rounded out the front part. So we're going to make 2 of these pieces for each chair. Use the first piece as a template, but cut it in a way that I'm doing it right here that has a little bit left over. I'm going to mark here, cut off. We want to have that little bit of space here. This is going to be what we put our spindles into. So we want that little bit of extra space to hang on to. And also when we start poking the holes, there won't be so much stress put on the very end. So depending on how many spindles you made and how far apart you want them and all that stuff, you're going to have to measure that yourself. I just put the ruler down, then I chose a unit of measure for the distance between each of my spindles. So I started with the center first, and then I poked 2 holes for the center ones. And then the front ones, I wish I would have put them forward a little bit further, but oh well. I did what I did. So there's my 2 ones that are going to be sitting a little bit forward. Now you want to make these holes a little bit bigger, of course. So I went through with the awl, and then I got another little tool and then just opened up those holes a little bit more. Now we're ready to attach the spindles. So we're going to get the wood pieces off there. And like I said, we want the spindles to be longer than we need them, but this is a little bit too long, so I'm just going to take some off here. We want about an inch or so longer than we need. So I'm going to spread tacky glue. I put a bead of tacky glue in each one, and then I'm just going to run my fingers around each one with its own bead of tacky glue so it's completely saturated with the tacky glue. And I'm sure any white glue would work here. I prefer tacky glue because it's a little bit easier to work with when you're building miniatures. So I just need to wipe off my fingers here. Since I got the first pass through, you're going to have a bunch of fibers stuck to your fingers, so you just want to wash your fingers off there. Now I'm going to do this again. I'm just going to pull these down and spin them, each one, just pulling and spinning. And there's going to be more fibers, so I'm going to have to, again, put this aside and go wash my fingers off. So this will be the final time I'm going to spin them again, each one. And the glue is somewhat drying at the same time here. It's making it easier to work with. So I'll just get the tips off there. Now I'm ready to install them into the seat. So I just want to make each end into a pointy as possible. So now I can stick it through. And go slowly. You don't want to push this in and then it gets frustrating. So if it's not working, stop and make that hole a little bit bigger. So you want to get each one through. Don't force it in. Try to get it in as gently as possible. So once you got all 4 of them through, then you decide how long you want your spindles to be. So I have to go according to the first chair I made. And now I'm going to hang on to the top of the chair and then pull the bottom and spinning at the same time. This is going to tidy up the spindle. And again, take your time with this step. Just make sure that it's all looking the way you want it to look. The very tops, you can keep pinching them like I'm doing here. Use your pliers as well. Now I'm going to cut off the excess. I'm going to leave about a 1/4 inch. And then those I'm going to spread open. I'm going to use my awl to help me here. Just kind of spread them open and fray the ends right into the bottom of the seat. I'm going to get them down as flat as possible. And now we can cut off that mark there, get the excess cut off, and I rounded out the back of the corners just a little bit. And now I'm going to add the tacky glue over top those frayed ends there and work those into the bottom of the seat. Now if you manage to get those as flat as possible, you don't need to do this step. I'm going to be attaching the bottom of the seat, but I just took off a little strip here. This is the very top layer. And again, you don't have to do this step. But if your frayed ends there are sticking up a little bit, you might have a bump in your seat. But I really wouldn't worry about it. I don't think this was necessary. I didn't do it with the first chair. But I noticed on the second chair, because I did it a little bit differently, I had a little bit more spindle sticking through the bottom. Anyways, I added tacky glue to the entire surface and now attach those 2 pieces. You can keep working with this while it's, before it's cured. You can keep manipulating the material. And that's what I keep doing. I don't ever just leave it. I'm always checking and using my pliers to pinch the tops and the bottoms. Alright, so just popping in with a quick edit because in the next clip I'm going to make this unpaintable edge paintable. I used a McDonald's napkin because it's very thin and I didn't have to worry about any edging showing up in the paint. But if you wanted a cleaner look, we could do the same thing here like we did for the table itself. So you could use thin cardboard and glue that around. Now I'm going to take my napkin and I just cut a straight edge there. I'm going to put glue along the edge of the seat and then I'm going to lay my napkin right over top that glue. And the glue I was using is Elmer's glue all. I'm using that glue because it's a bit thinner and it's not going to be so heavy it won't rip my paper. So you just cut off the excess and then paint the glue over top. If all I had was tacky glue, I would water it down a bit just so it wouldn't rip the paper during this step. Now take a look at that crack in between my finger and my thumb. That crack's a little bit too big just for paper, so I'm going to fill that in with glue and just add a little tiny piece of twine just to fill in that hole. And once that's done, then I can just paint the glue, add my paper, and then glue over top that, cut off the excess, and we'll let that dry. All right, that didn't take very long. The very top of the chair, I do bend it a bit to give it a somewhat of a curve. And you can see it's dry to the touch, of course, and everything, but I'm still able to kind of manipulate the material. It's not totally cured yet, but it's looking really, really good. The very top of the chair, because I've touched it with gluey fingers, it's got some bumps on there. So I'm just going to take an emery board and sand those down flat. And next we're going to make the legs for the chair, and then we'll paint them up. Now for the legs, you can use whatever you want to for legs. I'm going to go with twine. So I'm going to get a piece here, way longer than I need, and I'm going to rub the tacky glue all over it, pulling and spinning this to get it as straight as possible. I'm only going to be using a tiny bit of this string, but I want way too much to work with. All right, I gave that twine about 20 or 30 minutes, enough time to stiffen up. It's not totally cured yet, but we can go ahead and work with it now. I'm going to choose the part of the twine that has the least amount of bumps in it, because naturally twine has full of bumps and stuff. That's why we want a longer piece than we need. So I have a section there I'm going to use. I'm going to cut these longer than I need, so probably a quarter to a half an inch longer than I need. I'll cut up 4 of them. All right, now we have to poke the holes for the legs, and you want to get as close to the corners as possible without it getting too close, of course, just like a regular chair. So just kind of figure that out before you start poking the holes there. Try to do this gently. I have a little bit of dip on this one chair in the back there, so pushing too hard would just make that dip grow. So I had to go as gently as possible. Now that I have the hole there, I'm using a little drill bit and I'm just opening it up. Now I'm only going to the first layer of this cardboard. Remember, we have 2 pieces of cardboard sandwiched together. So I'm only putting the hole as deep as the 1 layer of cardboard. I'm not going into the second layer. All right, so I'm just going to test these out, make sure that all the holes are big enough, and they are. So I just have to get the tacky glue now and fill in each hole with the tacky glue, and then plop my legs inside there and just give them a little twist. Make sure you're getting to the bottom of the hole. And make sure your chair will stand up, of course. And then the next step I do is I'm going to wrap embroidery thread around the very base, right underneath the seat. Wrap it once and then pull tight and then wrap again without pulling the leg out of there, of course. And just push it down into the glue. Now we're going to cut that free, the excess. And that's going to create a little bit of a wall there, and it will just add so much more strength to the leg itself. Then add a little bit more tacky glue over top of that. Just make sure that the embroidery thread is pushed all the way down and it's created a little bit of a wall. Once you got all 4 done, we can go ahead and trim them up. Now I did use my first chair as a guide there, but then I stopped and I got another little piece of twine and just did a unit of measure with that twine. And then I was able to stick it in the glue right beside the leg itself, and it would stand up, and I was able to use that as a guide. So I did all the remaining legs that way. And of course you want to take your time with this step and just make sure that you're cutting slowly. It's better to cut too long than too short. And of course in the end we just want to make sure that everything is sitting level. So now we can go ahead and paint it. And I forgot to mention that once the twine is dry, and I would leave it for about 24 hours or so, like just wait till the next day, you can actually take an X-Acto blade to it and you can shave off parts that you find are sticking out a little bit too much. And that's the great thing about this twine. Once you put the glue on there and it's dried, you can actually shave off parts that you don't want, and it comes off very, very nicely, very cleanly. Okay, so I forgot to mention that, so I'm just showing that now. But I painted it black, so the next step I'm going to do is give it a coat of burnt umber. And then because I had a day between my 2 chairs, I forgot that I did not add cinnamon brown like I normally do that to my woodwork. So my first chair, it got burnt umber, and then I did a dry brushing of beige and a little bit of black. So the second chair I forgot and I added a coat of cinnamon brown. That's why it looks a bit lighter here. So I'm going to actually, after I try this step here, I realize, hey, they're 2 different tones. So I'm going to repaint this burnt umber. All right, my mistake was fixed, and you can see the tones are a little bit closer here. So now I'm going to take a dry brushing of a little bit of beige. Now dry brushing, you just want to dip your brush in there, and then you want to get the majority of the paint off. So you're just transferring a tiny bit of that color over and just adding like a wood grain look. So I do this step all over the chair. So the back of the chair and the spindles and the legs get the same thing. And you can also do a dry brushing of a little bit of black as well. And once you have the tones the way you want them, then you can go ahead and add a sealer if you want to do that. And you can use any sealer of your choice. I'm using this clear nail polish because I like the shine of it. And the water-based sealer that I have on hand is a satin finish, and I wanted a little bit more of a glossy finish to the chairs. Alright, so all we have left to do now is stick the table and chairs where they belong. I think they turned out absolutely adorable, and they're very strong, guys. I know the materials that I used would say otherwise, but they are actually very strong. This little basket I forgot to mention in my last video, I also made by hand, and it's made with pine needles, and I have that video here on YouTube. You can look in the pinned comment below. And if you notice, my fireplace is going to be a little bit more orangey, a little bit more brighter than my last video. In my next video, I'm going to show you how I manage that. I'm also going to show you how I made this crystal ball, which is absolutely gorgeous, and I'll show that in the next video as well. If you need some ideas for filling up your little kitchen with food, like these little loaves of bread and cheese, these are actually rocks, and I show you how I paint them. You can look for that video in the pinned comment below, along with this little pantry that I made as well. It's just to give some ideas if you need them. Alright, my friends, that brings us to the end of another video. If you found it helpful, be sure to give that thumbs up and share with your friends. That helps me out a lot. Also, be sure to subscribe before you leave so you know when the next video is available. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.